Ist er? Ich bin live. Okay, das ist ja sehr schön. Mir wurde gesagt, ich sei live. Mal schauen, ob der Chat funktioniert. Oh. Oh, da ist aber ein guter Delay drin, ne? Ja, okay. Dann würde ich sagen, wir fangen mal an. Erstmal schön, dass ihr alle eingeschaltet habt. Wir veranstalten den Indie Treff heute mal in digitaler Form von zu Hause aus aufgrund der Corona-Maßnahmen. In dem Sinne hoffe ich, dass ihr alle wohlauf, gesund und munter seid und die Situation so gut es geht meistert. Boah, dieser Delay regt mich ein bisschen auf. Ich höre mich doppelt. Wir haben heute nicht ein allzu riesiges Programm. Wir haben eine Speakerin heute, beziehungsweise gleich im Anschluss von meiner Begrüßung wird die Projektmanagerin Margareta Schneider von der Game City noch das neue Incubator-Programm vorstellen, der Game City. Dazu kommen wir gleich. Ansonsten hoffe ich, dass ihr einen entspannten Abend habt, der Talk euch gefallen wird. Und nach dem Talk zeigen wir euch noch eine Game Station. Und danach gibt es noch zur Abmoderation und danach werden wir noch ein bisschen im Chat gemeinsam quatschen. Ich wünsche euch viel Spaß dabei und ich würde an der Stelle auch schon mal direkt an Margareta Schneider von der Game City übergeben. Viel Spaß heute Abend.
Yeah, hello everyone. I think I'm gonna do this in English to hopefully reach even more people. I'm Maggie from Game City Hamburg, and I'm very happy to be here tonight to give you a short, very exclusive glimpse into our new upcoming program, the Game City Incubator. The incubator is, besides the prototype funding by Game City Hamburg, another pillar of the support from Hamburg to help game developers and developing teams to realize their projects and ideas. What is the incubator? You can imagine this like this. 5 teams will be supported for about 3 months with knowledge through workshop and coaching programs. They will be provided with office spaces in a co-working facility, and there will also be a financial support. All of this is intended to allow those teams to work on their projects with high concentrations, with the resources they need, and also the informational support to create successful projects. The incubator program is intended for all kinds of developer teams, student teams, possibly young startups, or those who are in the process or are looking to found their own company in the games industry in Hamburg. It is, however, required that the team size does not exceed 5 members, and also the team members should be aware that they have to be available for the workshops on 1 to 2 days per week during the duration of the program. So for those 3 months from September to early December, simply because it is important that they can really take part in the workshop to make sure they can use all of the potential the incubator offers. So what exactly does the incubator offer? As mentioned before, workshops and coaching by industry professionals play a very big role in the incubator program. I will say a little more about this in a minute. There will also be a financial support of up to 15,000 euro per team, which is intended to cover all expenses for the project, like maybe software, hardware that is needed. And depending on the corona situation, maybe travel cost to an event or admission cost to events. I think there's enough reasons to need money to cover project costs. We will also provide offices in a co-working space. This, of course, also depends on the corona situation. We are prepared to hold workshops and networking events digital only if necessary, but of course it would be nice to work together in one co-working space and connect right there. We will see how that will work out. For the workshops, you can expect different topics from aspects of game development, of course, but also some more business-related issues like how to identify and also lift your project's market potential, how to create a very good business plan, and what to consider when you and your team are planning on founding in a company, like legal issues and the like. And of course, general project management for game-related projects. All of this will start very soon. Even in June, the application phase will start. So yeah, very, very soon. The application phase will run until the end of July. And this time you can apply with your projects. And at the end of July, a jury of industry professionals will review those applications and will invite teams for a pitch. And from those pitches, they will choose the 5 teams that will enter the first round of the incubator. Those 5 teams will then be able to start the program in early December. They will have hopefully access to the co-working spaces. They will receive the first batch of their funding, and most important part, they will be able to start working on their projects. After half time of the 3 months, so around October, teams will again present their project and the progress they made in a pitch, before then starting the second phase, which gives additional and more deepening workshops, and also, of course, time to finish their projects and really polish them really nicely for the big final presentation at the end of the program. If you're interested in all of this and are considering to apply, that's great, first of all. You will receive this information and, of course, much, much more on our website. But if you're heading to our website, Game City Hamburg, right after this event, you won't find it yet. That that's intended like this. We will share all of this information very soon. This is so this presentation tonight is actually a very exclusive Indie Treff special presentation with first information, because we actually think that this program can be very interesting for possibly many of you, and we would be really excited if you decide to apply. So guys, to get all this information, just stay tuned to our channels. I can highly recommend you to join our Discord server if you haven't done that yet, Game City Hamburg. You can find a link on our website, Game City Hamburg, and I think it will also be posted in the chat here. On the Discord server, there will be a dedicated channel for the incubator where you can post all the questions you might have, and of course receive all the information you will need in the upcoming weeks for application and then start of the program. So that's the first impression of the incubator. Stay tuned. Thanks for your interest, and we're looking forward for your applications. And I am now looking forward to the talk by Jackie.
Hello, I'm Jackie Martin, and welcome to my talk, Perception and Associations of Colors and Games. I will try to answer most of the questions I see in chat, so don't be afraid to ask. But yeah, I heard there will be like a question round after the talk. So I will pick questions that where I see something interesting coming up. So first things first, who am I? And why am I qualified to talk about this topic? So I'm a freelance artist specialized in 2D environments and creative lead of a small gaming company. I try to connect the dots between computational science and art. And my expertise covers graphic design, concept art, and direction, as well as IT project management. And I love to help small and medium-sized companies with their product launches. So if you want to, feel free to reach out to me, and let's talk about social media channels or over email or elsewhere. So why this talk, and why should you care? Color is one of the elements of a game that gets taken for granted. It's used to build visual harmony or dissonance throughout an environment, and is a great marketing tool. And without color, a player may not notice what's going on. Like who is a friend, who is a foe, who's going to shoot me in the head. You don't know. So without effective color systems, games wouldn't be able to visually guide players, and the gameplay may suffer. And today I want to talk to you about a semiotic approach where it's about color as meaning. And before we dive into that, I have some interesting facts. So, yellow is the most irritating color. And that's cool because now I have your attention. And especially the bright yellow is really irritating to us. And why? Because more light is reflected by bright colors, resulting in excessive stimulation of the eyes. Some claim that babies cry more in yellow rooms. Yeah, sneaky. Husband and wives quarrel more in yellow kitchens, and opera singers throw more tantrums in yellow dressing rooms. None of that is scientifically proven, but you can trust me. Because, no, but lighter shades of yellow can be comforting, while yellow with black is more of an attention grabber. You can see that with street signs, for example. And it's the most visible color to us, and it's the first color we see that the human eye notices. So now that we are all talking about first impressions, we as humans see 10 million or approximately 10 million numbers, colors. And there are more men who are prone to be colorblind. Like 1 out of 12 men is colorblind, where it's only like 1 out of 200 women that is colorblind. Women also see more colors. So men see more towards the 7 million, while women or some women may actually see up to 100 million, which is closer to the eye of a reptile. And thank you for posting the link. So if you want to, you can actually make a color test of how accurate you can see colors. And we as humans need 200 milliseconds to process a facial expression to generate a first impression, and only 0.1 second to determine if someone is trustworthy. So I hope you determine me as trustworthy, because it needs only 7 seconds to form an opinion of a human or a business. And overall, it only needs 50 milliseconds for first impression of a website. I tried to find out if something similar was done for games, but I couldn't find anything. So I would just assume that there are similar values when it comes to first impressions for games. Because also, we only need 2.6 seconds for our eyes to settle on key areas of a website. But what is important, the first impressions, 94% of these are design related. So bad layout, wrong color choices, and pop-up AdWords or something like that will determine the first impression, and only 6% of that is content. So now that you know all that, what does that have to do with games? Are colors that important? Well, that awkward moment when you're a chicken in the 1990s, and there's a Harvard Business School graduate who finds out that providing chickens with red-tinted contact lenses leads to them fighting less, eating less, and produce more eggs, which overall theoretically results in a higher profit. Well, turns out farmers were not that convinced. Yeah, who comes up with that, right? Because also, yeah, I don't know, I could not find more on it, but apparently investors had a hard time relating to egg production. But yeah, apparently we as humans are not that different when it comes to color, especially red. You may know the term as I only see red, I'm so angry, but it had a calming effect on chickens. And in case you didn't notice, we as humans are not too different because all we want to talk about is red. And there's a scientist, MIT professional of brain and cognitive sciences, Edward Gibson, who discovered by accidentally stumbling over, well, he didn't accidentally really stumble over it. He was making a different study, but he found that there is a great deal of variation in the way colors are described by members of the Tsimane tribe. That's a tribe in Bolivia. And he found that most Tsimane constantly use words for white, black, and red, but there is less agreement among them when it comes to other colors. And some languages use as three as like the Tsimane, these three color categories, while languages of more industrialized cultures use up to 10 or 12. And what are these color categories? That's like yellow, red, orange, blue, green, something like that. And he also found out that across 100 languages that he analyzed with his team, that there were more categories for warm colors and less categories, for example, for blue and green. So you have yellow, orange, red, but less of the cool colors. And that was across every language. And to explore the possible explanation for this trend, the researchers analyzed a database of 20,000 images and found out that in these images, there are more likely objects in the foreground to be warm than to be cold colored. And I found the screenshot that I found very fitting of Sir Eats-a-Lot, where you can see that we maybe intuitively put all the cool colors in the background, and all that's important to us in game design, all that we want to talk about are the red colors, are the characters, are everything that's interactable. In this case, the donuts, the main character, the HP bar. These are all warm colors. Yeah. So colors across different cultures is probably relatively well known. And there's always, when you think about localizing your game, there are examples of color cultural mistakes businesses can make. So just to give a few anecdotes, there was a Japanese company that made black scooters, and they wanted to sell them in India. But they didn't sell well because in India, black is connected to death, and no one wanted a black scooter. And once they changed the color, they also made sales. And similar to that, there was also a company that wanted to enter the Chinese market with their chewing gum product. They made a green chewing gum, and they were wondering why it didn't sell. And then they changed the color to pink, and then it suddenly sold because in China, green is a sacred color. So what do I want to say with all this? We do not only perceive colors differently based on our biology, but also based on our culture. And our perception is connected to our language and to our surroundings, the group we connect with in our real lives. And looking from color from that direction, color becomes more of a language. And then we look for the meaning behind this, because study of meaning, semiotics, is what I truly want to look into. So I'll just read this. Signs are used to designate objects or ideas. The representation of the sign is taken as the meaning. In this definition, signs are colors. So colors are used to designate ideas in this case. And there are 4 semiotic concepts. In this case, a color represents something other than itself. For example, red would be a fire, red would be danger, anything else than just the color red. It's more than that. And these signs, these colors are interpreted by the player who's playing our game. And this color stands for something to somebody, and these players take active roles in interpreting these colors. So that's a little tricky because you are sending a message, but you don't really know what the person is understanding or reading then, because they put the meaning into that depending on their background. So the meaning results when the sign is interpreted, and the meaning emerges from the relationships we make in the game itself. So between the elements we have in our game. And that entirely, the context of our game shapes the meaning behind these colors. That is like the environment, then the set of rules we apply to our game, for example. So, that is like, I don't know if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But otherwise, I would now tackle the theory behind this all. And to do that, I'm coming from a computational science background. We like definitions, and I want to establish a vocabulary because what I've noticed is that if you want to hire an artist and you don't really know why things are not turning out the way you want them to look, and you don't really know how to speak the language of color. Oh my god. You want to really transport your vision, so I think it's good to establish a common ground first. And in video games, the color palette is your first impression. It can set the mood for a whole game, generate your emotions, and all that beautiful yada yada. And there are many definitions of color out there, and depending on what context, for example, movie or just a picture, you have different color catalogs. And in some you have the colors black and white are part of the colors, and in some you may not. And in some color catalogs you have complex numbers where red is or white is hexa, and then other color catalogs are strawberry red and egg white and all these weird names no one can remember. Yeah, so if you've been in an art class, you probably know the color wheel, but I don't want to dive too deeply into that. But I want to give you the tools to make your games and your scenes look good. And what I've noticed, what makes and breaks a lot of indie game developers' scenes in games is wrong use of saturation and value. So what is saturation and what is value? Without a clear understanding of saturation and value, no color scheme will ever help you. And saturation is about the intensity of the color. So red is the most saturated, and the really bright red on the left is the most saturated, and then 20% less saturation would be this more rosé color. Value, on the other hand, is all about the brightness of a color. So on the left, you would have 100% saturated red, and then you would go darker. And with that, you open up a whole color spectrum that is called a situation. So that is where color gets very symbolic, because a color situation is when you say, for example, this is a red apple. And okay, yeah. So sorry if some of you get 0 with the test. I see there are a lot of colorblind people in the chat. But yeah, so this is where we see color very symbolic. For example, we say this is a red apple, And is the apple really red? Probably not. Probably they're like, it's a light shade of red. Is the grass really green? No, it's probably shades of green. Is the sun yellow? We all see these things as symbols and not really for the color that they are. And that is something we need to be aware of if we want to make games look good. And most of the times what is the problem is if the saturation is too high. As you can see here in the top picture, the saturation is very high, making it look pretty fake, because in the normal world you don't see something this saturated. So if you take the saturation down, you will get a more realistic image. So to just give you the tools, how you can express yourself when it comes to colors, you have low saturation, then you have high saturation, you have cold colors, and you have warm colors, and then you have bright and you have dark. And then when we come to a semiotic approach again, you have pure color and tainted color, or dissolute and rich. So the idea is to understand colors not as a technical property, but as a concept. On the left, you have colors in the technical sense. For example, a pen, or my markers here. These have like colors written on it, which would be, I don't know, just a number. And we want to use colors in games as something we can portray a concept with. So more than just a color A, color B, and so on. It's a semiotic approach to color. So color as a language. And so when asking a person, what color is this object? Any answer you get is part of your color catalog, not only a number of whatever you found in Photoshop or elsewhere. So an object can be red, bright red, dark red, blood red, dirty red. It's whatever answer you get. And it's important that we accept that that works for games, because games in itself are not that, or colors for games are not that researched yet, I want to say, because for film or for pictures, these are still relatively older media, where it's already established. But we also have like luminosity, sequences, this whole interactable aspect of it. And we need to also accept that for us, black and white would also be part of these colors. And once we open up ourselves to color as meaning and not a technical property, we can combine these colors and make them relate to each other. And the way people read colors is usually pretty subjective. And to use the semiotics of color to our benefit, we need to take into account emotional and socioeconomic and cultural variables. The actual meaning in any particular situation depends on the context in which the color is being used. So here we have, for example, this ice cream. It doesn't really look so well on the green background. It doesn't look appetizing to us. And when you add other aspects of visual appearances to color semiotics, such as gloss and texture, translucent, anything that really alters the color itself, it becomes just more complex. And what is interesting to note is that the social groups, for example, of sport fans, will associate different meanings to colors because, for example, they associate different things with their teams. Like this team has a blue and red flag, therefore I like these colors more, and I associate more positive things with these colors. And the team I dislike has different colors, so I dislike these colors. And the appropriate use of colors semiotics impacts the success of design and the message you want to deliver with your game. And yeah, it's a very tricky field to navigate because you cannot you can influence associations, difficult word, you give to color, and we really want to establish a common ground, but you cannot influence completely what the person on the other hand interprets into that color. Yeah, so what can colors then do for us in games? They can do a whole lot. They can be a help for visual appeal, show progression, signifying affection, all this communication that's really important to us. And this knowledge about color spans across several disciplines, and we can learn a lot from like physics, biology, and other design spaces. And it's a really useful tool if we really want to create emotion and create meaningful games, which I assume we all at the end of the day kind of want to create. At least I want to create meaningful games, and therefore I think color is a really great construct to create that. And I want to dive first in the visual appeal. So this is a graphic I found about color samples from the top 5 most popular games per year from 1987 to 2012. I have not found a more up-to-date picture, but I found it pretty interesting that we can see that the colors go more from very saturated to nude, which I would assume is due to more realistic games being released, and maybe less 2D artsy games, but that's just a guess, so maybe it's not all that true. But for example, Atlus realized very early how important color is, namely with their Persona 3 title. And they had a talk around 2017 where they presented Persona 5, and also in that they had a talk about why they came up with the Persona 5 UI. And you probably, if you know Persona, then it's a pretty great UI, and I can recommend you to play it. And yeah, okay, I'm fangirling. Anyway, so yeah, they came up with a specific color for each Persona game because they were facing the problem that their games were actually super fun to play, but they weren't selling. And so they needed a drastic change, and their idea was to change the UI design because it was the best way to attract a larger casual audience while changing the image of the brand of the series at a really low cost. So for Persona 3, they went with blue for coolness and stylishness. For Persona 4, they went with bright yellow for a retro pop aesthetic. And for Persona 5, they went with the active, passionate red color. But what is interesting about this is that in all the other Persona games, other than Persona 5, they were still using subcolors under the main color. But in Persona 5, there were only these 3 colors, black, white, and red. Only in HP and MP. But that led to them having to introduce other design elements to make sure everything still remains readable. And then at the end, they also had Catherine, which had a striking pink color to convey its sensuality and kitschy atmosphere. And I really think that Atlus is a mastermind when it comes to colors because, for example, if you look at the screenshot, they are so consistent with their color picking. You can see the pink in the t-shirt. Again, it's a very dominant color in this picture. And because we earlier talked about saturation, you can even see that the hair of the other main character is a saturated form of pink. And also, the new Catherine full body introduces a new character which has surprisingly pink hair. So yeah, picking the right color and being consistent with this will help you sell more games. And we know that art in itself is super important if you want to sell your games, and that you're often told that you need to invest a lot into artists to get these really good assets, but that's not always the case. So what I sometimes talk about is how reducing the colors and going very minimalistic will be the best way to market your game. And at the end of the day, this is in a way also what Atlas did. They don't have a great or a big variety of a color palette. And if you look at Limbo, it's basically white and black. And why is that so good if you're an indie developer to go with a lot of black? Well, that is, for example, if you look at horror movies, there are a lot of well-working horror movies that are indie, that are made with very low budget. Because if you go with a lot of silhouettes and blacks, then you can hide all the details. And what that does at the end of the day is if you hide the details, then you have to make less assets. And so you cut a lot of budget by just hiding the details, because you can just portray everything to one color. In this case with Limbo with black. Yeah, but that is not all. Color can also help give a player a sense of progression. And I think Journey does this really beautifully, where you start out in a very warm atmosphere, and the longer the game goes, you end up in a cold and empty mountain area. And I really like that. But there's still more. So there's also signifying faction. If you ever played with someone else and played some form of Super Mario, and you had the second controller and you were Luigi and you were, oh my god, you were blue and green. No wonder you didn't like that, because our brain immediately goes like, that's kind of unimportant. I don't want that. So yeah, that first. But we also tend to if there are multiplayers or if there are different factions, then it's always warm versus cold color. But if there are even more than 2 players, then there's a priority. Like there's a high priority in these games, which is like red, blue, yellow, and then green. And then come other colors such as orange, violet, and so on. And you have that across multiple different games. That is the case, that this is the priority we immediately tend to go. And what is also very interesting, for example, is what Blizzard Entertainment does beautifully. They kind of want to portray the Horde as evil, but at the same time as good. And this is really interesting because a Swedish bachelor student found that when analyzing people and asking them what colors they associate with good, they would say green, white, and blue. And what people associate with evil would be black and red. So if you look at the picture of World of Warcraft, you can see the Horde is at the same time good and bad, while the Alliance is just good. And this is how you make use of these expectations that people have. You can communicate mechanics. So you can communicate the purpose. Okay, if something is violet, it will 100% poison me. And if something is red, oh my god, I'm healed. So same goes for rules and functions. If something is suddenly bright red or indicates to you, hey, you can jump from here to here, like in Mirror's Edge, then you immediately know that. And one of the most interesting things to me is content variation. You got so many different sprites you can just skip out on making by just having hundreds of different slimes in JRPGs or skills or potions or whatnot. And back then that was a cool thing to save some work, and it's still there. It's awesome. But there's also something else that kind of got forgotten over the time, which is color cycling, which now kind of, I don't want to say it comes back because no one knows about it, but I kind of want it to come back. It's color cycling with HTML. which was used to increase art content, usually for 8-bit and 16-bit color games, and to reduce the intense task of multiple 2D sprites. Yeah, thank you for posting the link. And this works on websites, and if you click on it, you see that the color palette is being changed, and this is the way it's animated, which is in my for me, it's really impressive to see. And yeah, so you also have color as use of mechanics. And the unfinished swan, the concept is beautifully exploited. So the mechanic is that you have ink balls which you throw into a wide space of nothingness, and if the ink ball hits something, then it will color the object it's hitting. And like that, you explore beautiful landscapes, and it's very painterly and really soothing game. And it's just a beautiful idea. So at the end of the day, I kind of also want to inspire you guys to and girls to maybe come up with, like, look at color as something more as just a potion or something you need to have in your game as a typical stereotype, because you can use it to evoke emotions. Different color schemes can convey way more than simple emotions like sadness or anger. So this is the same picture but different colors, and you just have to find your palette or the right color palette for the emotions you want to convey. So this is way different than, for example, this, from what you feel and what you get from it. Then there's this whole concept of world building. You can for example, make your world more cohesive or make it feel more cohesive by, for example, color grading, where you apply post-processing effects later on, and just make it feel more united, more like one. And the principle itself also applies to individual game assets as well as full-screen compositions. So, for example, here you see that the focal areas, the areas you want to your viewer to be guided to, are the ones with the highest saturation, the blue hair and then the red color, or the very violet hair and then the blue eyes. Trent does this really beautifully. And that is how you guide visual interest. Because at the end of the day, this is all we want to do. We want to guide the player so we can tell him the story we want to tell with our game, or the mechanics we want to show. So there's this visual hierarchy of importance where the player is at the very top, and underneath maybe an additional player, but not if you're Luigi, and then enemies, and like everything interactable like objects, and then everything not interactable like the environment and like visual phenomena like, oh my god, there's a moon, that's so pretty. So stuff like that. And now I want to give you the tools to put that into your games with color layouts. So what are color layouts? Color layouts mean the distribution of colors in scenes, images, and individual game assets such as 3D models, sprites, and UI elements. And there are two groups, color objects and color canvases. And this whole idea is based off of contrast. So if you want to improve your game really quickly, first look at your saturation. Is your background outshining your player characters? If yes, put down the saturation of your background and up the saturation of your player character. Otherwise, you will end up with this kind of noise. And this noise is something that will hinder you player from reading your game properly. So you have, for example, in the left screenshot, you have a lot of noise if you pixelate it down. But if in the right screenshot, you know very clearly what is happening, even if it's completely pixelated. And in non-interactive media, color palettes serve the purpose of creating images and so on. And we get even more overlap to games with fields like interior design and so on, and fashion. But what is interesting is that these things are like real life spaces, and that in itself can also be mapped to games, where it's not only about color palettes, but it's that weird, I want to say, dissonance, where the less a color has allocated space time, so the less often you see a color, the more important the color becomes to us. So it's the opposite what we would assume if we put a color, for example, like green, often in the background, and we see it the whole time, it becomes extremely unimportant to us. But if we have this yellow, as in the screenshot, only pop up every now and then, it becomes this really important contrast to us. And contrast lives on simplicity and extremes. And the more colors and shades you use, the less present a contrast you have. And if you want to accomplish clarity and get rid of this kind of noise, it's important to make the contrasting colors very differ. And here we come back to this color canvas and color objects. So in Limbo, again, the color objects is all we want to talk about. And in Limbo, that's black, and it's only black. But you can have more color objects, but then you need to make sure that these color objects also contrast each other, but that they are not so that they're still different from the color canvas. And in Limbo, for example, it's black, and then the color canvas and everything that's unimportant and you cannot interact with is white. Yeah. So, but you need to make sure that the objects on the, well, you can say object layer are contrasting with the color canvas. Yeah. So now I've bombarded you with a lot of stereotypes, which brings me to the question: can we break these stereotypes, and should we? Because we are like, games are working because we are working with the expectations of the players. And we can break these expectations by forcing certain associations on players. For example, with this piano keyboard. We all have seen a keyboard, maybe, I hope. Usually it's black and white, but by adding color to it, we are kind of forcing a sense of override. But is that something we truly want? Do we want to? We could break all the stereotypes. Maybe it would be a really interesting game to make, a game that's just trying to break every stereotype ever. I've not seen one yet, but I think it would be maybe something really cool, or maybe really horribly boring and frustrating to play. I don't know, but it's kind of a cool idea, I find. But at the end of the day, does it make the game more interesting? These are questions we need to ask if we think about color. Does it make the game more fun? And does it synergize with other features in the game without breaking them? And I think the most important part in this is, if I get rid of a lot of colors, can I explain to the player how the function or how the mechanic works again? And I think that works well to a certain extent. But if you go too minimalistic, then you have to introduce other design elements again to get rid of the clarity, to establish the clarity again. So, I hope you found that interesting and enlightening. Maybe I could have added in more color jokes, but thank you for your attention. And yeah, so if you want to reach out, I hope you can embrace color palettes a little more, and I would love to see more interesting takes on colors. And please reach out if you want to have more knowledge on it and further readings. And otherwise, thank you for inviting me. I was happy, and thank you for yeah. Oh yeah, questions. I have not looked at questions, but otherwise I'll give the micro to Slava. Thank you for the applause. Thank you, thank you. Okay, yeah, questions. I was told you guys have 3 questions. Go. I have a perfect color IQ score. Yeah, there you go. That's one question. Mm, uh, okay. Color layouts sind nicht dasselbe wie, I'll do this in English. Color palettes are not the same as color layouts. So a color palette, I actually don't think I have a color palette in the entire talk. Oh, this could be a color palette, for example. It's just colors you picked. And that is really all that is to it. Colors you picked. And color layouts is, where is it? There it is again. It's the distribution of the colors in the scene. So it's a little more than that. It's the individual assets, the 3D models, and the whole how you have a color palette, and then the color layout is how you make use of that color palette in your scene. Does that clear that up? A color layout can have multiple color palettes. That's a very good question. I would say yes. If you, for example, have one scene with one color palette and then the next scene with another color palette, that is completely possible. Aber ich glaube, also viel ist ja jetzt auch eigentlich geklärt, oder?